Tonight on Real News from the Blaze, is the media once again falling down on the job and setting its own narrative? SC, what do we know?
Well, a young couple from Norfolk, Virginia were on their way home from a show when they were assaulted at a traffic light by a group of teenagers. And the weird thing is that the local paper didn't report this story, even though the two victims work at the paper. So we'll try and look at why. It's a complicated story.
All right, sounds good. All that and more from Real News from the Blaze tonight at 6 o'clock.
This is not going to be about politics. This is about principles. We're going to take it upon ourselves to be part of the solution.
We are going to restore history, restore our honor, restore his idea that character is what matters.
Let us not lose this battle because we sat down.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Well, hello, America, and welcome to the Glenn Beck Program and to the network that you are building, GBTV. Saving our country is a monumental task. We have outthought ourselves in the process. I mean, it doesn't take a Harvard degree. It takes common sense. It also takes truth and courage to speak the truth. Then you just let the chips fall where they may. Anyone willing to put those things ahead of themselves, ahead of political correctness and personal interests, in my opinion, is a hero. Even if sometimes, Bernie Sanders is one of these guys. I don't agree with Bernie Sanders, but I think that guy has courage. He at least admits he's a socialist. He's the only one in Congress that has the guts to do it. This week, we're showing you people I believe to be heroes. Some of what you have heard, and some of these people you haven't heard of. It started last week with Ted Nugent, who you've heard of. I mean, he is taking it on, man, and not sitting down. You may agree or disagree with him, but he's not sitting down. Monday, we had the whistleblowers from the NSA. These guys, you want to talk about courage? These guys. On Friday, you're going to meet an incredible group of parents and kids whose faith in God has allowed them to work through what others view as disabilities. Truly one of the most amazing shows we have ever done. That's on Friday. But tonight there's a hero from another land, a Dutch politician who is the leader and founder of the Freedom Party there. This is a man who is truly unafraid. Either that or he is insane. Why would I say that? Because he is standing up to the biggest threat to peace the world faces, and he's doing it almost entirely alone. Radical Islam. You don't do that unless you really truly believe it or you're nuts, because you have a good chance of having your head chopped off, literally. In 2008, he clearly showed that he knew what he was saying and believed it and was willing to die for what he believed in. He released a 17-minute short film called Fitna. The film demonstrates how the writings and teachings of the Quran are used to incite violence and terrorism. Perhaps not so shockingly, Fitna didn't sit well with the Islamists and the politically correct Dutch government, who then charged him with hate speech crimes. The world is upside down. I remember seeing Fitna. I was working then at CNN, and I heard it was causing all kinds of controversy. And I remember standing in the control room waiting for it to download on the internet so we could finally see it. I was expecting it to be truly horrible and shocking. But when it finally downloaded that day, we watched it. And I remember looking at the producers and saying, I mean, is that it? Because I thought, man, I really hope that, the Dutch government doesn't see our stuff. In 2007, we ran a 1-hour special called The Extremist Agenda Exposed. No one up until this time had done any of this work on television in America. It was the top-rated show for the entire year on headline news. It beat Fox that night. And it was tough to get through. I'm happy to say I don't have a single fatwa in my head. But Geert has at least 2 now that he made the film and won't sit down. To me, that shows how much further down the road Europe is, and the wrong road. A prominent Muslim preacher, who's the head of the Global Islamic Youth Center in Liverpool, England, called for Dutch Muslims, who number close to 1 million, to behead Geert. Al-Qaeda ordered his assassination, declaring he must be slaughtered because he had insulted Islam. In the name of Allah, they said, we ask you to bring us the neck of this unbeliever who insults Islam and the Muslims and ridicules the Prophet Muhammad. All told, he has received 285 death threats in the year he released the movie, 2008. His life now is similar to that of a political prisoner. Hidden in a safe house, has round-the-clock security, is constantly moved around, has limited interaction with his own family. He is the most threatened politician in all of the Netherlands, perhaps the world. He has needed security since 2004, when there was a plot to murder him that was foiled. To just have him in our studios here in Texas, and we've had prime ministers, we've had presidents. When we had Prime Minister Netanyahu here, who's not really a liked guy, we didn't have the security that we've had in the last week or so. They've had 2 security sweeps this week before he even came to the building. And what's really, truly ironic, Geert is the one who is being banned now from entering countries on the grounds that he's a threat to society. The guy in Liverpool who said, bring me the head of this man, is living in the country he can no longer visit. In 2009, he was banned from entering England. We talked about that when I was on Fox. It was a night I was trying to show you that soon in Europe it would be hard to tell who the real extremists are and who the good people who are warning, using common sense problems and warning. Soon you wouldn't know the difference between an extremist and a common sense guy. I want to show you what's happening right now. What's happening in Greece right now. The Greeks have the ultra-nationalist party called Golden Dawn. It is rapidly growing there. In fact, the last election, it had 2.9%. That was in 2009. Now their support is over 5%. I read a story last night that talked about somebody who has brought teddy bears and helped with cancer and everything else, and they said, okay, sure, they have some problems, but who else is helping us? They now have enough to enter Parliament for the first time. Do you recognize the symbol at all? These are your neo-Nazis. Here's what one party volunteer said, quote, these immigrants have not been checked for diseases. If a Greek person feels threatened by an immigrant, I justify someone trying to give them justice. I don't know why I should care about violence against immigrants. These are the extremists. From where I stand, the way it looks to me, Geert Wilders is not one of them. Even if we agree to disagree on particular issues, Geert is a guy you still can be civil with. He's not going to kill you for disagreeing. And that's where the problem comes in. And either we're going to be able to have these kinds of conversations or we're not. But I warn you, if we don't have these conversations, we will fail to live in a country where you are still able to speak your mind. We're all either going to be on one side and we'll kill all the others, or we'll be over here and they'll kill all the others. That's not good. Tonight's program is for adults only, for people who are willing to hear things that make them uncomfortable. Let's see if we can just agree on what Ronald Reagan said. Ronald Reagan said, if you can just agree on 7 out of 10 things, we're allies. We have some tough questions for our guest tonight, but he's not going to have any trouble answering them, I'm sure. When you are threatened like he is, I have a feeling you've pondered a lot of things. Death threats haven't stopped him from talking and bringing up the tough questions that most people, most politicians all around the world are too afraid to even consider, like the dangers of multiculturalism and political correctness. He continues to fight to get hate speech laws abolished and institute a First Amendment for Europe. He is now warning Americans, take note.
We will never stop fighting for freedom. As a matter of fact, the more they threaten us with death threats, with fatwas, or with the legal jihad, the more determined we become to continue. We are responsible to preserve our freedom, and we have to take that responsibility at whatever price it may cost. For losing our freedom is no alternative. Freedom is the most precious gift that we have, and we must give it to generations to come.
Considering our current administration is now legitimizing and partnering and hiring members of the radical Muslim Brotherhood and putting them in high stations in our own country, it is a warning, America, you need to hear. He also has a new book out called Marked for Death, Islam's War Against the West and Me. Egypt protested that book and called it defamation of Islam. But here's the funny thing, they did that in December, 5 months before the book was even published. Geert Wilders. He is the leader of the Dutch Freedom Party and author of the new book.
Hi, Glenn. So nice to meet you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Here, let's, first of all, let's start here. What is your life like?
Well, I'm an elected politician in the Netherlands, so I do my job mostly in the Dutch Parliament in The Hague, but not under normal circumstances. Since 8 years that the threats began, I have lived with my wife in prison cells, the exact same cell as the Lockerbie suspects were held in my country, in army barracks, in many places. Now we live in a safe house protected by the Dutch government, so as safe as a bank. But in the process, I have to admit that I lost my own freedom. I have not walked the streets anywhere in the world by myself for 8 years, or driven a car, or did some shopping, or whatever. And this is something that you really don't wish your worst enemy to have, whatever political opinion you have, whether you're liberal or anybody from the right side of the conservative side of the political spectrum. We should have freedom of speech without being threatened. And it's not about me, Glenn. Most people who speak out, who dare to speak out against Islam, pay a high price, as I do.
Let me, I want to get to some of the views and stuff, but I'm interested in, I mean, I've had conversations, I don't have your life, but here in America, there are people that speak out that are coming under attack, have threats, etc. I don't have to live in a prison cell. But I know I've had conversations with my wife where my wife, and I have it as well, said, what am I doing? I don't want this life. I don't want to be that person. Have you had those conversations with your wife?
Well, the most difficult part for me, I have to be honest to you, is how it affects my family, the people that I love. I mean, nobody deserves death threats for using the freedom of speech. Like the first chapter in my book, Marked for Death, I say we use the pen, they use the X. And I expect if I write an article or if I make a movie that if you don't like it, you write another article or your own movie, but you never use the X to silence someone. Nevertheless, the results of what I say are death threats. And at least they are aimed at me, but as long or as soon as it also touches my family, my wife, my mother, who is almost 80 years old, well then, for me it's the toughest, those are the toughest moments with the most doubt. But at the end of the day, I always continue because I know that not so many people speak out, and that the problem is that serious that we really cannot afford to be silenced by people who don't use arguments but use threats. They may never win in a free society.
Okay. The difference between America and Europe is just a matter of time. Would you agree with that?
Certainly.
Yeah. You guys have been playing this multicultural battle longer than we have, and we're still going down that road. I mean, you've got everybody now coming out and saying, hey, you know what, this may not be working. Tell me where Europe and where your country is right now. Give the American people an idea of what's coming our way.
Yeah. Well, exactly, this is my point that I also use in my book, that please, America, the beacon of freedom, as I see it in the Western world, in the whole world actually, learn from our mistakes. And we made, unfortunately, I have to be honest about that, so many mistakes. We invented the multicultural society. I always say that the biggest disease in Europe today is the misconception of cultural relativism. And the political elite, the political correct rulers of most countries in Europe fool the people by saying that all cultures are equal, that there is no difference between a culture based on Christianity or Judaism or a culture based on Islam, and therefore that mass immigration is a good thing to happen. Not a bad thing, but a good thing, an enrichment to our societies. The normal people, however, are waking up. They see that it's not true. They see that it's both costly. Only in Holland, the immigration of non-Western immigrants cost us 7.2 billion euros a year, which is a lot of money, at least in the Netherlands. Crime,
it's still a lot of money.
It's still a lot of money.
Yeah.
Crime has risen enormously. We have a lot of immigrants from Morocco, and the Moroccan youth in Holland, 6 out of 10 of them have been detained at least once in the Netherlands, and people don't feel safe. They don't feel at home in their own street, in their own neighborhood. So we went in a total wrong direction. If you look at honor killings, if you look at genital mutilation, if you look at forced weddings, they are happening everywhere today in most countries in Europe. And the people are waking up. This is the good news. Parties like mine, who didn't exist 5 years ago, we became the 3rd largest party in the Netherlands 2 years ago at the elections, out of nothing, because people are fed up by the political elite ignoring those kind of problems.
No, it's a danger that I've been worried about for Europe, but here in America as well, that when the problems get so big, then you can look for a charismatic leader, and extremists will come. I mean, nobody was considering the Nazi Party in Greece a couple of years ago. Now 5% are.
Yep.
And so if you don't deal with common sense before things go crazy, then you're in trouble. How do you... I sat with a bunch of people from Parliament when I was over in Israel, and they said, we want to, you know, we need help, we need some Tea Party, we need some help on some things. And I said, honestly, and I don't say this to the European politicians any differently than I say to the American politicians, I don't trust you. I don't trust politicians. But Europe is extra spooky because you don't have a history of small government. You don't have a history of, small governments never rounded a bunch of people up and killed them all. It's a big government. Sure. How do you make sure that your party isn't affected, or any party that isn't affected, that says, hey, we've got a problem with immigration, we have a problem with Muslim extremists, we have this problem. How do you make sure that that doesn't become round them all up, or, God forbid, in worst cases, we repeat what every country has?
Yes. Well, this indeed is a major threat to, in some countries. Big government is a problem everywhere. As a matter of fact, we supported the minority government in Holland, and we pulled the plug 2 weeks ago. That's why we have elections on September 12 in Holland. not because we disagreed on austerity measures, but because the government wanted to raise taxes instead of trimming the government. So a big government is a European problem. In Europe, unfortunately, there are many countries that don't have a party like mine. We are maybe a popular party. We have conservative, cultural conservative issues, and other issues perhaps we are a little bit more liberal, but we are democratic, and everybody sees us as a non-violent, democratic, non-racial party in Holland. Otherwise, we would have gotten 1% of the vote instead of 15% of the vote. It would be impossible. However, there are countries in Europe, like the United Kingdom or Germany, where there is not such a party, where the political elite parties, whether they are the CDU in Germany or the conservatives in the United Kingdom, they don't address the issue. And then the danger is that racist party, like the British National Party, which are blunt racist party, I would want have nothing to do with them even from a million miles distance, they radicalize. So the solution is that parties like mine, we also have them in Denmark, the Danish People Party, respectful parties that never use violence, always work in a democratic way. This is the only solution. You see now that leaders from France, from Germany, from the United Kingdom said last year, all three of them, Cameron, Sarkozy and Merkel, they said the multicultural society is a failure. They all said it. But they don't mean it. They don't act upon it. There is still a lot of immigration. There is still no beating of this enormous crime.
I'm going to take a break here, but let me just ask a real short question. Is the problem immigration or assimilation?
The problem is, like I said before, is that we are unable to define who we are. Don't forget, Europe has gone against our nation states. This is why I also, and I write about it in my book, how important the nation state is for your own identity. In Europe, we don't know who we are anymore because of this crazy structure of the European Union.
Right. So is it, it sounds to me, I mean, it's kind of a slippery answer there. It sounds to me what you're saying is assimilation. It's not immigration. It is, this is who we are, and if you want to come, be part of us and assimilate.
Well, I think both. A, anybody who comes should assimilate. This is number one. B, we have had too many immigrants from countries like Northern Africa that are overrepresented on social benefits, are not speaking the language, are not working, are overrepresented in crime. So they bring along a culture, Islam, that really is different from our own culture.
If those immigrants were from America and were on the rolls, weren't working, et cetera, wouldn't assimilate, didn't speak the language, would you have a problem if it was a bunch of people that were like me?
I would have a problem with anybody who doesn't work if they can work and can contribute to a society. But I have an extra problem, which is the reality in Europe today. We don't have problems with people from New Zealand or Canada or the United States in the streets of Holland. The reality is that we have problems with people from non-Western countries, often Arab countries, and we should deal with that. And you should be able to say so without being labeled racist or extremist.
Okay,
we are
so
not.
Let's get into that. I want to get in specifically to Islam when we come back. Just a bit. This week has been a week of remarkable heroes and people who are just doing incredible things.
If you cross the line and say something that they don't particularly care to have said about them, then you can become a target and they could start really spying on you.
You have a gun pointed to your head?
Yes, I did, yeah.
You were in the shower?
I was in the shower, yes.
This is not a movie plot. It's what happened to 4 individuals desperately trying to bring a program to Congress's attention. And as a result, the government tried to destroy their lives. Their homes were raided at gunpoint. They were under constant surveillance. They were either fired from their jobs or blackballed from future employment. They were threatening you with a felony and threatening you with prison time.
I had all the licenses, the tags. I registered my bait. I made sure that everything was legal. The boat was legal. My bow was legal. My kids were legal. Everybody in camp was legal. I have been really demonized and attacked with just vicious hate throughout my career and my life. And I take it as a badge of honor, because if you're not really upsetting idiots, you might be an idiot.
We are here to teach this dog a lesson.
One of the more brave men of our time, a guy who's risking life and limb to speak out about radicalized Islam in Europe. We have people in the streets march around saying, I can't do it. I've been handed a tough whatever it is. And here's Annie doing it, doing something that most people would say,
These kids, they have disabilities, but what we don't talk often enough about is their ability. Our responsibility as parents is not to the disability, but to the ability of the child.
For me in my life, I've seen that God takes what society may think of as weaknesses and turns them into our greatest strengths.
America, the question is, will we go over the cliff with the rest of humanity? No is the only answer. Harry Reid and his Democratic cohorts continued to praise President Obama over and over and over again. Yesterday, Reid thanked the president for his tremendous leadership in the fight against terrorism and his commitment to U.S.-Afghan relations. Meanwhile, this is the third year in a row that the Senate under Reid's leadership has failed to even pass a budget. You couldn't get away with that in your own home. How is Harry Reid and the Senate doing it? They're driving this country into the ground. And that's why Freedom Works for America is working to take the Senate back in November. But they need your help. They need to raise about $200,000 here in the next few days. I want you to go to takethesenate.com and make a contribution. It is critical that Freedom Works reaches the goal of $200,000 by this Friday to be able to help take the Senate back and fire Harry Reid. Go to takethesenate.com and do it now.
By age 5, I could drain a three-pointer. By 8, I could outplay opponents twice my size. By 10, I knew someday I would make the pros. Focus, dedication, determination. These are the things that have prepared me for today. But for what tomorrow might bring, I prepared with Food Insurance Emergency Food Supply. It gives me the confidence to face any opposition. Order today at foodinsurance.com.
Democrats maintain their Senate majority. Harry Reid celebrates.
Don't let this happen. You still have the power to take the Senate. Glenn Beck and Freedom Works for America are committed to mobilizing millions of patriots to fire Harry and take the Senate. We must begin now. Donate $20.12 to takethesenate.com and get this great bumper sticker. Glenn Beck, Freedom Works, and you, an unstoppable force. But we must have your donation today. Go to takethesenate.com now.
Okay, so has anybody actually started saving for college yet?
Oh, not me.
No, you got time.
Oh, no, we actually started.
You have?
Really? Sure. We figure you start saving a little now, or you'll borrow a lot later on.
Yeah, but how did you even know where to start?
Oh, I found out about the Gerber Life College Plan.
Call now for free information on the Gerber Life College Plan. It's easy.
It's pretty much worry-free.
Well, how could it be worry-free? What if something happens with the stock market?
No matter what happens, we get guaranteed safe growth.
So when she's ready for college, the money will be there.
And it doesn't take a lot of money to get started.
For as little as $10 a week, you can start saving for college and get guaranteed growth. Just call now.
Oh, it's a life insurance policy, too.
Oh, that's different.
And if she decides not to go to college, there's no penalty, so she can use the money for anything.
We've got to get started.
Yes, we do, because you're going to college.
Call 1-800-892-3073 for your free information. That's 1-800-892-3073.
I live alone, so when I slipped and fell in the kitchen last month and couldn't get to a phone, that's when I knew I needed Life Alert. With just one press of this button, I'm connected to the Life Alert Center, where I can get the help I need, even when I cannot reach a phone. With Life Alert, I'm never alone.
Call 1-800-996-6392 for your free Life Alert brochure. That's 1-800-996-6392. Call today.
Coming up on Real News, the administration wants to loosen restrictions on weapons trading or does it? Buck, what's going on?
I think surprisingly to most people, the Obama administration seems like it wants to allow the U.S. to sell more guns abroad. So we're going to talk about how that would be and why they may be doing this.
Amazing. That's up next on Real News from the Blaze right after Glenn at 6 o'clock.
All right, here come the tough questions, because there's something confusing to me that I don't know if I understand from you. I have good friends who are Muslim. Zudi Jasser, who is you know him?
I know the name.
Yeah, he's a good man, and he is inside trying to reform. Do you believe that you can be a Muslim and not be an extremist or terrorist or a danger to the West?
Well, it's not important if I think that's possible. I think it's important if Islam believes it's possible.
Wait. I want to stop here because I want to make sure I get you every step of the way here and understand what you're saying. If you say that, you are giving the responsibility of definition of who's a Muslim and who's a bad Muslim to the extremist.
No.
No?
Now listen, my definition of Islam is twofold. A, it's what's written in the Quran. B, it's the life of Muhammad. Anything else is unimportant. Because as you know, Muslims believe that the Quran was the literal word of God. And the original copy is still in heaven on the golden table, and it was recited in the year 610 at the night of Qamar through Gabriel to Muhammad. But it's the literal word of God. And the word of Muhammad, as an example, is also the life of Muhammad is an example for many people as well. And the Sirah, the biography of Muhammad, teaches us his life. Anything else is unimportant. So I believe that there is no and there never will be a moderate Islam. However, I believe in people. I make a distinction between the ideology. I believe Islam is more, maybe we can talk about it later a little bit more, an ideology than a religion, and the people. And of course, most people who call themselves Muslims are non-violent, are not terrorists, are not extremists. It would be ridiculous even to suggest that. So I acknowledge the fact that the majority of the people who call themselves Muslims are non-violent, moderate people, but according to the two bases of the Islam, being the Quran and the life of Muhammad, they will probably will not be seen as
Okay, you're a big supporter of Israel.
And I'm the biggest one, at least in Holland.
Okay, I'll arm wrestle you. Big supporter on Israel.
Yeah.
I know some of the biggest rabbis in all of Judaism today. Some of them extremely orthodox. Some of them not. But wait, hang on. But I don't know a single one of them that stones somebody to death for adultery. Okay? But they're still Jewish. Even though the text says, without the New Testament, the text says, stone them for adultery. They don't do it because there was reform and growth there. Aren't people like Zudi reformers who are saying, hey, we shouldn't stone people to death for homosexuality anymore? And isn't that important to support those people? Even if you didn't believe in anything that they believe, wouldn't that help destroy the tenets and the support of those who are stoning people for being homosexual?
But there's a big difference between Judaism or Christianity and Islam. Not only the difference that Muslims believe that it's the literal word of God, unlike in Christianity and Judaism, but look at the Quran, look what it says, and you can totally not compare it to the other real religions. It says that apostates have to be killed. It says that the infidels have to be killed. It says that the Christians and the Jews have to be killed. As a matter of fact, when Muhammad traveled from Mecca to Medina, the Jews did not want to stone anymore, and he reintroduced it for adultery. So even if you look at it from an historical reason, there is a big difference between Islam and the other religions. So yes, I applaud people like your friend, and I know many of them myself as well, who are for moderation, who want to assimilate in any possible way in our free societies. And I wish that more people did it. The best way, according to me, would be that Muslims, if they would, as a matter of fact, choose for liberty, for them to leave Islam, to not consider themselves Muslim anymore. And it's not my invention. It's like the Turkish Prime Minister, Mr. Erdogan, said, and unfortunately on that part I have to agree with him. I disagree with a lot of things he says, but I agree with him. He says there is only one Islam, and that is the Islam of the Quran. And this, unfortunately, is true. We can, and we should invest in people, but we should forget about, it's a fairy tale to think that Islam will be moderated even in 1,000 years.
I don't think I agree with you on that, but
okay.
So then in your, let's say, you know, you become the king of the world. Do you ban Islam?
I would not ban Islam, but I would make it, I would have less Islam. Yes, I proposed.
Well, that doesn't, I mean, in America, those are politicians who say, abortion, I'm against it, but it should be, it should be available and safe. And
well, let me give you a fair answer. In our party program in Holland, we are saying no more mosques in the Netherlands. We do. It's ridiculous, if you talk about reciprocity, that we allow hundreds of mosques in our society, where at the same time not one church can be built in Saudi Arabia. If you have a Bible, you will be sentenced for some kind of terrible penalty. So I say no more mosques in our societies. I say stop and close down all the Islamic schools. I want young Muslim children to assimilate, to get a job, to get Dutch friends, and not start as young children in a school that is based on separation and violence, because once again, that's true. And maybe, if you allow me, the big difference is that I see, and this is what I try to explain in my book, Marked for Death, is that Islam is not so much a religion. Yes, it has temples, it has a God, it has a holy book, so maybe 10% of the symbolism is really religion. But the content really is to be compared with totalitarian ideologies. That's why I always say, please don't make the mistake. I know how important freedom of religion, especially in the United States of America, is. But don't see Islam as a religion. Compare it with communism or fascism. They also had in common that you were not allowed to leave it. If you leave Islam, the penalty is death. It was not different in Nazi Germany or in communist Russia. The ruling that they have was not only for their own group, it was imposed on everybody. Look how Christians are treated in the Middle East. It's as bad as it never should have been. So if we see Islam more as an ideology than a religion, then the answer and the solution is that we should have less Islam instead of more. And I believe nobody believed in the past as well that fascism or communism could be moderated. Those were very wrong ideologies, like, according to me, Islam is. It doesn't say anything about the people, but the ideology is totally wrong and dangerous.
Back in a minute.
Democrats maintain their Senate majority. Harry Reid celebrates.
Don't let this happen. You still have the power to take the Senate. Glenn Beck and FreedomWorks for America are committed to mobilizing millions of patriots to fire Harry and take the Senate. We must begin now. Donate $20.12 to TakeTheSenate.com and get this great bumper sticker. Glenn Beck, FreedomWorks, and you, an unstoppable force. But we must have your donation today. Go to TakeTheSenate.com now.
If you're a veteran with a 100% service-connected disability and your family has CHAMP VA, here's some important news. With our Champ VA supplement, your family can have quality health insurance at very little cost. You earn this health benefit. Why buy private insurance or employers' health plans? Champ VA with our supplement gives you complete health coverage.
We also offer TRICARE supplements.
Call 1-800-899-1900.
The TRS Files, True Tax Resolution Stories.
My name is Gibb, and I am not an actor. As a result of my dealings with Tax Resolution Service, my tax burden to the IRS went from more than $35,000 to zero.
If you owe the IRS over $20,000 or more in back taxes, have unfiled returns, or are under audit, call Tax Resolution Services now, 888-7804-TAX, or visit taxresolution.com/GBTV.
You look so beautiful, but you're about to lose everything.
You're going to lose everything.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here
You're going to lose your files.
There's no warning when you lose your computer files. That's why you need Carbonite Online Backup. So whatever happens, your files are safe. Try it for free at Carbonite.com.
I live alone, so when I slipped and fell in the kitchen last month and couldn't get to a phone, that's when I knew I needed Life Alert. With just one press of this button, I'm connected to the Life Alert Center, where I can get the help I need, even when I cannot reach a phone. With Life Alert, I'm never alone.
Call 1-800-996-6392 for your free Life Alert brochure. That's 1-800-996-6392. Call today.
This is a tough topic.
Yeah.
Let me switch gears here, because I don't think we're going to make any. I don't think we have anything else to clear up here, but you know, between us, let me go here. How long does Europe have with the financial crisis that you agree with me that Europe is right here on the financial cliff, about to go over?
It's almost lost.
It's almost lost. How long do you think you have over in Europe, and what does a post-economic apocalyptic Europe look like? What happens next?
On the economical side, you mean, or on the side of Islam?
I would say economic, but the whole, because of the mess that with the communists, the anarchists, the neo-Nazis, the Muslim extremists, all of that, what happens?
I agree. Europe is today a big mess. Europe, as a matter of fact, has less support than ever in the people of Europe. Europe, the Eurozone became a transfer union. I cannot explain. Now I have to explain to my people and my constituents that we have to do for billions of austerity measures, whereas at the same time we pay billions of euros every year again to Greece, soon to Spain, already to Portugal, to Ireland, mostly southern countries. So I believe the Europe will, maybe a few months, maybe half a year, but it will collapse. The second thing that will collapse is the European Union. The European Union, as you know, started in the 50s as an economical cooperation organization. Today, it's politics. It's big, fat government and politicians who want to have as much power as possible, and it goes against the interest of the capitals of Europe.
Here we can see in America, we're looking at George Soros, who what they're trying to do is they're trying to knit us into a global union. You have European Union, they want a global union, and it's starting all on finances the same way. That ain't going to work. But how long, what does Europe go into in that Euro collapses? What does that look like? What happens to civilization? What happens to the extremists that are going to wrestle for power and think this is our chance?
Well, I don't think that's what happened. I think that many European politicians, like European commissioners or pro-European people who are in favor, politicians who are in favor of a big, strong, fat Europe, they say, and they said the last few months, that we should not do anything against Europe. We should not have less Europe, because otherwise there will be war, there will be no electricity, there will be no food. They frighten the people by the idea that the concept might be gone, the popularity because of that. So I think that is not true. I think one of the reasons we are in a big mess, both financially and culturally, is that we lost, what I said before, the idea of our identity. And for the identity, we need a national unity. We need our own countries anymore, again. And we don't know today anymore who we are. We don't know who we are. We lost it in a supranational body, and we should get our powers back from Brussels, our involvement out of Brussels, our own currency, our own foreign policy, our own flag, our own. This is what I like in America. On every school, you have a big national flag, and people unite through a national identity. We have lost that. We should have it back. And I think there will be more instead of less stability. Europe is the worst thing that could have ever happened to us.
Do you believe it will happen peacefully, relatively speaking?
Yeah. Why not?
Not communist or national socialists, you know, not fascism or communism?
I don't think that, I don't know one country in Europe where fascists today have any serious chance to get...
Check 1925, you could say the same thing about Germany, though, too.
Yeah, but what I'm advocating now is that we get rid of the Eurocrats, of the unelected bureaucrats from Brussels, and go back to decide ourselves whether we have to pay money to the Greek government or not, whether we support Israel or we need a total European standpoint with all different kind of opinion. So I'm asking for more sovereignty. I'm not asking for anything bad or war or whatever. I'm asking for more stability than we have today. And once again, the fact that the Northern European countries have to pay for the economical mess that the Southern European countries made today is something that no politician can explain, and that we should end immediately.
Here, best of luck.
Thank you so much for
long
having
life
me
to you, sir.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you. God bless. Back in a minute with the Oval. It is a complex and wild world, isn't it? I want you to go to cheaperthandirt.com and become educated on firearms and ammo and accessories and how to get started. I have to tell you, every time I go to the NRA, somebody will start talking to me about guns, and I'm a rookie, man. I am an absolute rookie. I didn't have a gun in my home until a few years ago. I have one now. If you've never had a gun in your home, Cheaper Than Dirt will educate you on what being a responsible firearm owner is all about. You need to do the right thing and protect your family, and now is the time. Go to cheaperthandirt.com, cheaperthandirt.com.
In 2000, the U.S. national debt was $5.6 trillion, and gold was $272 an ounce. By 2010, the U.S. debt was $13.5 trillion. Gold had risen to $1,421. Today, our government is projecting over $20 trillion of debt in the year 2016. Isn't it time? You own gold? You can't control federal spending, but you can control where you put your investment dollars. Goldline has safely delivered billions of dollars in gold to its clients for over 50 years. Diversifying with gold is a smart strategy, and it's easy to get started. Call Goldline and get your free investor kit. Be sure to ask about our price guarantee program. Use your credit card for safety and convenience, and enjoy free shipping. Call Goldline now and buy gold with confidence. Get started today with Goldline.
Bringing a firearm into your home is one of the most important decisions you can make. If you are considering gun ownership, cheaperthandirt.com is here to help you make a responsible and informed choice. We understand it is a personal decision how you choose to protect your family. We offer thousands of choices of firearms, ammunition, and accessories to suit your individual needs. Be responsible, be proactive, and exercise your Second Amendment right. Find us online at cheaperthandirt.com. That's cheaperthandirt.com.
The TRS Files, True Tax Resolution Stories.
Hello, I'm Gary, and I'm not a paid actor. I went from owing $43,000 to the Internal Revenue Service to paying them $1,000.
If you owe the IRS over $20,000 or more in back taxes, have unfiled returns, or are under audit, call Tax Resolution Services now, 888-7804-TAX, or visit taxresolution.com/GBTV.
Democrats maintain their Senate majority. Harry Reid celebrates.
Don't let this happen. You still have the power to take the Senate. Glenn Beck and FreedomWorks for America are committed to mobilizing millions of patriots to fire Harry and take the Senate. We must begin now. Donate $20.12 to TakeTheSenate.com and get this great bumper sticker. Glenn Beck, FreedomWorks, and you, an unstoppable force. But we must have your donation today. Go to TakeTheSenate.com now.
We have spent time tonight talking to Geert Wilders. He's a man of strong views, a man of controversial views, a man who is strongly disliked, and you may or may not agree with him. But the one thing you can agree on is he's never been convicted of any crime. He didn't break the law. He spoke his mind. Although a court has never accused him or even convicted him of anything, he has been convicted in the court of public opinion. His life is under constant threat. Why? Well, because his views are not popular with the elite. Does this sound familiar? The elite have left him exposed now. The threats and hatred. They haven't defended his right to free speech. He's pretty much a prisoner in his own home. He's a man who now can never truly be free because of the threat of mobs and mob justice. It doesn't matter if it's radical extremists of Islam or Christianity or capitalism or anything. Mob justice. That's an instructive story, isn't it? Mob justice? Because we've seen it before here in America, and I think we're seeing it again. We have a lot to learn. We find this story shocking, and yet the story of mob justice is not so distant in the American past, and is it in our future? Quite honestly, this is the speech the President of the United States should be giving to our country. Mob justice. That's our topic tonight, here in the Oval. Hello, America. Tonight I want to talk to you a little bit about something tough, mob justice. It is alive and well in America again. Today, a man stands charged with murder. It's a case many Americans have read about or heard about, and even more have talked about without really even knowing anything about it. It's the case of Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. We all know very little about the night that George Zimmerman went out and shot and killed Trayvon Martin. That part we know. The rest, we can only guess. We can opine, we can even believe, but we do not know. Not yet. We can't know until we have the process of a trial, the process of justice, of evidence collected, witnesses, calling a jury of peers, passing a judgment. And so I believe that right now, anyone who does anything to exact justice is committing an act of injustice. And where there is one injustice, there is no justice. We have seen examples now of people intimidating key figures in the case, lawyers, officers of the court, witnesses, and of course, the accused. These people are in danger because they are just connected to the process of justice. This intimidation itself is injustice, and it is un-American. And if we allow it to continue, we participate in that injustice. I've even seen some politicians that have spoken out about the case. They have made their views known. But what about the facts? These same politicians are like everyone else. They do not know at this point what happened that night in a small town in Florida. They don't know. And so, by voicing their opinion, they are just guessing. Political leaders are supposed to be custodians of the system, a system of laws and a system of justice, where the accused are innocent until proven guilty. When anyone undermines this system, they are no longer leaders worthy of the name leaders. It is unacceptable to judge a defendant guilty before trial is even held. It's even worse to be silent in the face of mob justice. We are hearing of attacks where the victims are told, "This is for Trayvon." The victims in this case are white. The attackers, black. The attacks are vicious, some fatal. This is not justice for Trayvon. It is a bloodlust for sport or violence for the sake of hatred. And it is wrong in any circumstance, white, black, brown, it doesn't matter. We are all too familiar with mob justice in America. We have seen these dark periods in our history before. We have seen as well the cowards who stood by and just let it happen. We know that, thankfully, history judges a lynch mob forcefully, but history also judges the silent that say nothing, the complicit. Those in the mob are criminals. Those who don't stop the mob are cowards. This republic cannot coexist. It cannot stand on a foundation of criminals and cowards. Which are you? Tonight, a man stands accused. The crime is serious, it's murder. And the trial that awaits him will determine whether he is to remain a free man or not. But because gasoline has been poured on this case by outside agitators, by ill-informed commentators, by opportunistic politicians, because of that, George Zimmerman is not the only figure on trial today. Our system of justice is also on trial. It is being tested and pushed to its limits. And my question is this: who will defend our system of justice? Who will stand against the mob? Who will defend the rule of law, the privileges of the accused, the protections of the witnesses, the responsibilities to evidence and precedents? Who will do this work if this office won't? It was a tragedy, and we're seeing more tragedies, not only in the name of Trayvon, but also on the streets with Occupy. If you want justice, there must be honor. The best way to respect the memory of Trayvon Martin and all of the victims of both justified and abhorrent violence in this imperfect country is to honor the principles that our legal system is built on. I remind all Americans of all backgrounds that justice is blind. Justice only seeks truth. And those who claim to be leaders must stand on the side of truth and justice. It is the American way. They must stand for restraint. They must stand for calm. And most significantly, our leaders must stand against those who would take the law into their own hands. Our republic depends on it. It depends, as always, on you. Thank you. Thank you for watching, and may God bless the republic. We'll see you tomorrow night. Good night, America.
Breaking news tonight. We've got real news. This just in.
Real news from the Blaze.
Welcome, everybody, to Real News from the Blaze. Well, the role of the media has been debated for centuries, but what we can agree on, what we're supposed to agree on, is that it's supposed to communicate information. Fair, balanced, direct information. But what if that information is deemed too sensitive to reveal, or maybe the players, the villains, the heroes don't fit the neat media narrative? Take the case of the couple attacked at a stoplight in Norfolk, Virginia, and were beaten up by an angry mob of up to 100 people. Sounds pretty newsy, right? Maybe even a national story. But the story never made the area's only newspaper, even though the victims were reporters at that newspaper. Will, what's going on with this story, and maybe more generally, what's going on with the media?
Well, let's talk about what we know of this story right now. So this is what we know. Two reporters were driving simply, I think, 4 blocks from their newspaper office. They worked for the Virginia Pilot newspaper, which is in Norfolk, Virginia. They stopped at a red light, and they were approached by something like 100 teenagers, which is surprising to me, by the way. 100 teenagers, what are 100 teenagers doing together on the streets? But that's supposedly how the story goes. And a rock was thrown at the car. And the driver of the car, a guy named Dave Forster, gets out of the car to confront whoever threw the rock. He is attacked at that point by some of these gang of 100 kids. And then a female passenger riding with him gets out to say, hey, what's going on? And she's somewhat attacked at that point, too. Her hair is pulled, her eye is scratched. They call 911. They try to call 911 numerous times, get busy signal, finally get through, and they're able to scream, essentially, the location of where they are. That's the long and short of it. The cops eventually showed up. It was written up as a police report that it was a simple assault. They were injured. Doesn't look like they were injured terribly. They went back to work, I think, within a week. They had some bruises.
But a harrowing night, nonetheless.
Harrowing night, nonetheless. Now, the story did not appear in the local newspaper, the newspaper for which they worked, until I believe it was maybe a week later, and it showed up in the opinion column, in the opinion section of the newspaper, and gave the details of this story. So the detail that I didn't give you in that entire setup was that the reporter was white and the gang of 100 teenagers was black. Now I'm going to tell you this. When this story came to us today, that we were going to discuss this story on this show tonight, I was hesitant. I was hesitant to be the person who introduces you to the story. And the reason I'm telling you that now, and the viewers that, is because it's possible that my hesitation to even discuss this story, or to be the person that presents this story to you, might even be actually part of the story. It might be a symptom, my hesitation to discuss this story. I don't know why, but I think it's worth considering that could be part of the story, and then turning it over to you guys to say, why do you think this story was not covered in the local newspaper, or anywhere else for that matter?
Well, can I ask you, Will, what was it, do you think, that generated this hesitation for you? Is it because race is a sensitive topic, you didn't want to leap to conclusions, felt like you didn't have enough information? What was it?
More of the latter. More of the latter. I think the mantra that I tried to hammer home over and over throughout the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin case is that we simply don't know. There's no room for conclusions. There's not enough details, much less a larger message. And when I see this story, I feel not only bound by logical consistency, but it's just also my natural bearing. We don't know enough to draw a larger lesson. Now, maybe there's a discussion to be had about why this was filtered, why this didn't appear in the local newspaper, but I'm going to be very hesitant to draw larger lessons from it.
All right.
There seems to be a story here nonetheless, though, even if you take the racial component out and you know, you say, well, who cares, you know, who was attacking who, what race they were or whatnot. I was reading through this and I saw the wife claiming that officers didn't record any of the names of witnesses. I saw her saying that officers were saying that the attackers were, quote, probably juveniles anyway. What are we going to do about it anyway? They were sort of lackadaisical, saying, well, there's some public housing around here. We have lots of issues over there. There's nothing we can really do about it. So I feel like even if you took race out, which can be a very contentious topic and people don't necessarily want to draw conclusions when you don't have all the facts, there's still a story here about what was happening in terms of police behavior, in terms of potentially the police not doing everything they should have, in terms of a potential problem in the community, in terms of crime. So I think it needed to be reported, and maybe the deductions about race could have been left out and you could have just simply reported the facts. It bothers me that this story only showed up in a subjective opinion column. So in that particular paper, there was no objective reporting of that incident that someone could go to in the community and read and just see what actually happened.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. How much of a leap is it that the story, because it doesn't fit certain narratives that I think people at this table are familiar with, it appears in the editorial columns or op-ed columns, but it doesn't appear in hard news for a local newspaper. Let me just ask it this way. Do you think for 1 second that the people at that paper didn't know that their people that work with them were attacked? I mean, I don't buy that. So I think we can establish that they knew.
Well, in the story from the newspaper,
clearly a week later they thought it was worth writing an editorial about.
Right.
We don't know, but if we were to infer, which it seems like we have to do, the inference would be that the decision was made not to cover this.
Okay, so the story from the newspaper, though, to be fair to them, is that because the crime was coded by the police as a simple assault, that the newspaper doesn't generally cover simple assaults, and they were wrestling with this potential conflict. When two of our own are the victims of a simple assault, two of our own reporters, do we bend our own rules? Do we change our own rules and now cover something because somebody works for the newspaper? That is what the newspaper's justification for not covering the story.
And when somebody who works for a newspaper is injured abroad, for example, not killed, but just even injured covering a war, that's national news. Yeah. So I think it's interesting that on the one hand they say, well, we wouldn't want to cover it because we don't want reporters to be the news. Meanwhile, I know that if you work at a foreign bureau in Iraq or Afghanistan and you're even in a convoy that's hit or something and people are injured, that is going to be a headline, whereas the fact that other people are being killed every day is not.
You're not comparing war injuries to what happened here.
No, but I'm just saying, I mean, clearly just being a journalist doesn't absolve you from, I mean, they wouldn't say you can't be
That's true, but that's not what Will was saying. He was saying the paper doesn't cover simple assaults generally.
But what would tend to belie the newspaper's explanation is that the reporter's own description was that this was not a simple assault. This was a gang being set upon by a gang. So that in and of itself is a community story. Again, taking race out of it, just having a mob of 100 black teenagers attacking two completely innocent drivers down a street in the middle of the night, that in and of itself, that certainly goes beyond simple assault.
The man dressed in a Muhammad costume in Pennsylvania who was attacked, that was a simple assault. That was a national news story because of the politics involved in it. So clearly there are exceptions made. I mean, they say that we have a policy of not covering simple assaults. Obviously, there are simple assaults, and then, there's something more than that, I think, depending on the context. And people at newspapers love to talk about context. In this case, obviously, it seems they could have, had they decided to, and they did later. I mean, that's sort of the point. They thought it was worth writing an editorial about.
Why do you think they chose not to initially?
I think it's, that this goes to sort of the bias of not thinking that this is that important for whatever reason. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's clearly, on the police side of things, they didn't cover it, they didn't think it was essential, and so in this case, they didn't see a story, I think. Maybe that's it. They didn't think it was important, it wasn't a headline. I guess that's what it comes down to.
Just one quick second, I just want to say the woman who ultimately wrote the opinion piece reveals in it that she knew them personally, so I'm wondering if a personal reason was the reason she came forth and ultimately wrote that piece and felt the need to address it in some way.
The points I want to make here are, one, having experience on an editorial board, assigning stories, I absolutely would have covered the story. There's drama, there's a local angle. The story sounds somewhat spectacular, in fact. And especially having two of my own involved, I would have assigned this story. However, I think it's up to folks who are alleging it to prove that anyone on the editorial board deemed this story to be too sensitive, or made a decision not to cover it because of all of the issues that you've inferred here at this table. We have absolutely no proof of that, and I think it's a little irresponsible to project those concerns onto this story. And B, I think it's also a little naive to suggest that somehow crimes against white people in this country are underreported. That there's that kind of bias here, when in fact the exact opposite is probably closer to the truth. And the bias that you often most hear asserted is that, you know, crimes against little white girls, for example, are reported far more often than crimes against missing black kids. So I'm equally as hesitant as Will is to really get into the race aspects of this or larger cultural implications when A, we don't know a lot, and B, we have to fill in a lot of blanks here to make that leap that I'm just not willing to fill in. Again, I would have covered this story.
So you believe that they knew about this? The editorial board knew about this, right? We all agree that. They would have known.
I absolutely assume they knew about this story.
So, and you say you would have.
Because it was covered on the news.
But you say you would have covered this.
I would have.
Why? What reason could you?
Look, I have no idea.
But I didn't.
Neither do you.
I didn't finish the question. What reason could you conjure, for the purposes of discussion now, for them to not cover it?
Will brought one up, that they have a policy of not covering simple assault. You can not like that. You can not like that, but it's one explanation that we actually have. Every other explanation that you're inferring here is completely made up.
Well, that's like saying we have a policy of not covering drunk driving, and the governor of the state is caught drunk driving, and they're like, well, we decided not to cover it. I mean, clearly
you cannot buy that explanation, but I would prefer you don't invent explanations.
Well,
I just think that's irresponsible.
Let me ask this. The story was on the television news.
Right.
And it has not taken on a life at the national level, and yet we know other stories involving race where the facts were very much in dispute do become national stories. The Duke lacrosse case, for example. Why do you think in this instance national media hasn't gotten interested?
I don't know the answer to that, Amy, but here's one thing that I feel like as a conservative we have to be careful of. There is no doubt that the Trayvon Martin case is an example in my mind of media malpractice from start to finish. It was given to the viewer, to the reader, chock full of conclusions from those who should present a story to you with simply facts from start to finish.
I felt like I could never sort it out.
How would you be able to?
Exactly.
Right.
The rebuttal to that, the tit for tat on that, is not to do the same in reverse in my mind. It's not to find counterexamples, okay?
It's not to seek out examples.
Where the racial roles are reversed. The goal should be to always simply seek facts.
Right.
And I think you're asking for facts. I think it's okay. Ask why the story wasn't covered.
Yeah.
But I don't
That's
know
what I'm trying to do.
Yes.
I mean, I'm trying to come up with a rationalization for why they wouldn't do it. And I have to say, it's kind of hard.
It is difficult. But
It is difficult.
Unless you want to say that they
which
didn't want to cover this because it didn't fall into a narrative that the paper likes to tout, whatever that may be.
That's a possibility.
That's the only possibility is what I'm trying
No,
to
it's
say.
not, and that's pretty irresponsible.
That's the only one we've gotten to, I should say. I haven't heard another I'm sorry, the simple assault rule. Well, that's
right.
another one. Okay.
You don't like the explanation.
I don't
but
like
it's
that.
actually the only one.
I don't buy it.
That you're allowed to not buy it.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll go back on the water.
For another time, you having sat on an editorial board and all of us having opinions, it's a good thing to discuss. How does the media make the decisions it makes on what it covers and how it covers them?
Absolutely.
Complicated, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, the Obama administration wants to reduce restrictions on the export of firearms. A victory for domestic firearms industry or a threat to the United States security? We'll take a look at that question after the break. Stick around.
Democrats maintain their Senate majority. Harry Reid celebrates.
Don't let this happen. You still have the power to take the Senate. Glenn Beck and FreedomWorks for America are committed to mobilizing millions of patriots to fire Harry and take the Senate. We must begin now. Donate $20.12 to TakeTheSenate.com and get this great bumper sticker. Glenn Beck, FreedomWorks, and you, an unstoppable force. But we must have your donation today. Go to TakeTheSenate.com now.
Preparation, focus, hard work. It's a personal commitment. It's what drives me. It gives me the confidence to look my opponent in the eye and say, game on. Preparing for life's future challenges is just as important. Food Insurance Emergency Food Supply gives me the same assurance that I'm ready for whatever comes my way. Preparation is everything. Order today at foodinsurance.com.
Stop switching back and forth between drill bits and driver heads. Bo Riles here for the Halftime Drill Driver, the innovative new way to drill, flip, and drive in only 5 seconds. You'll never have to change a bit in the middle of a job again. And you can go from drilling to driving, Phillips to flat, any combination for any task. The breakthrough, our patent-pending swivel head that flips and locks, giving you precision performance from drilling to driving in seconds. You get the half-time drill driver for only $19.95. I'll even include 4 Phillips heads, 4 flat, and 4 drill bits, no charge. Call now and receive this durable carry case free. Call or click right this minute and get a second complete set free. Just pay separate processing and handling. You get it all for the low, low price of just $19.95.
To order halftime drill driver for $19.95 plus processing and handling, call 1-800-651-0874 or log on to gethalftime.com.
A recent proposal by the Obama administration would loosen the restrictions on the export of certain types of firearms. Officials claim that the move would reduce the regulatory burden for domestic firearms manufacturers, making them more competitive in the world market. While this might be on the surface satisfactory to free trade impulses and of conservatives in particular, the new laws could put high-powered weapons into the hands of dangerous criminals and drug cartels. One Homeland Security memo warns that some of the countries eligible for relaxed restrictions have, quote, considerable government corruption, significant underground economies, and no border controls for exports, allowing these countries to serve as transshipment points for diversion of small arms and light weapons. So where should conservatives draw the line on free trade? Is this all a matter of dollars and cents, or should we make it as difficult as possible for American weapons to fall into the wrong hands? Buck, this seems to be pitting two, different agendas against one another, global trade versus national security.
Well, I think everyone at the table would be somewhat surprised by the fact that it sounds like the Obama administration wants the U.S. to sell more guns abroad.
So weird. And loosen regulations.
And loosen and get rid of bureaucracy, SE. They're Byzantine, this bureaucratic regulation. No, so we have to unpack this and take a look. And then at the end, if you guys have any ideas as to how this is some sort of conspiracy, let me know. But
I have one idea.
In the meantime, we'll get to the conspiracy. In the meantime, this is what we're looking at. So we're basically talking about loosening of restrictions. No one's saying this is going to be sort of a free-for-all. And just to give you a sort of a sense of this, in the U.S., if we can pull up the chart, we have, 5.6 million guns manufactured in the U.S. last year. And of that number, if you go to the next, you can see that it's a tiny fraction of those are being exported abroad. So you're not talking about a huge number here. And we can also pull up that there are other countries that are. Here's worldwide arms sales. You can kind of get a sense of that. U.S. is, I think, at 43 billion globally, and is the big daddy in the room. And the U.S. is the primary arms exporter around the world. But there are others, and we can show a list. Others that certainly play into that too. The U.S. is number 1, number 2, Russia, Germany, France, and the U.K. Who would think that France sending guns all over the place? Anyway, hopefully they work.
Well, if you watch James Bond, you would know that.
Right. but so here's the thing. So it's a huge global market, and we do have pretty restrictive rules in place right now as to what countries can get arms from us. And we're not talking, just for the purpose of discussion here, we're not talking about loosening arms restrictions to places like Iran or North Korea or anything like that. We're talking about NATO countries. It's really 36 what they consider eligible and trusted countries to be getting more easily, I should say, and in greater number as a result of that, U.S. firearms. And this is apparently part of the Obama administration's desire to just up exports by 2014. So far, I'm not having a whole lot of problem with this. And here's the thing. They recognize that if we don't sell these arms to some of these countries, again, we're talking about a small list already. Russia, those other countries we saw could make up for that shortfall. Our domestic gun manufacturers are competing in a global market. They do have Byzantine, very difficult restrictions to sell these guns. Is it really fair for the current rules to basically mandate that not only do you have to know who you're selling the gun to, but there have to be sort of controls as to following and make sure you know who the end user will be, and Homeland Security and these other organizations talking about border control and such. It seems like that may be too many restrictions. I mean, at some point, aren't we just going to sell guns in countries that we have an agreement that we can sell guns to, and we can't expect to know where every single gun is going to go? I mean, these are other sovereign countries. So for me, this seems like a good thing. I'm having a tough time thinking why it's a bad thing.
The idea of a global Fast and Furious doesn't come up in your mind?
Well, when you say global Fast and Furious, I mean, are we talking? First of all, we would have to, I think selling guns to say like the Czech Republic, That's different than selling guns 10 miles across the U.S. border. And again, these countries that we have the agreements in place with as well, try to get a gun in the UK, it's impossible. I mean, these other countries, NATO countries, for example, already have very strict rules in place. And we're talking about things, shotguns and assault rifles.
Barrett 50 cals.
Barrett 50 cals.
Do you know what that is, Will? That's a big gun.
It is a big gun. More anti-material than anti-personnel.
Do you want a Barrett 50 cal in Turkey, which is one of the countries included in this privileged list, where border restrictions are under particular assault now by Syria? I mean, is this really something we're willing to do?
Well, I think so. I think we're already selling to these countries.
Let's sell Barrett 50 cals.
Well, if it's a Barrett 50 cal or Dragunov sniper rifles, I think I'd want US of A actually being able to compete in this global market.
1,000-yard shot with a Barrett 50 cal.
I just need one clarification, so for the sake of understanding this issue. We are not talking about loosening restrictions that are currently keeping, say, a Browning shotgun or a Winchester rifle from being exported. We're talking about regulations that are keeping Barrett 50 cals and
shotguns too, actually, but yeah.
Yes. There's a whole span. I mean,
big guns.
What are we?
Sniper rifles.
This legislation is still being tinkered with, and the administration has said in response to these concerns from people at Homeland Security and these other organizations, and really, I guess one of the major issues they say is, well, this stuff could come back here. Of course, the place of Mexico on this list would be a major concern.
Sure.
You'd want to know what are the export controls vis-a-vis Mexico, as we know from Fast and Furious. There weren't controls. It was just export via the federal government, illegally.
But let me address Will's question. Usually we have a list of these kinds of weapons, like close assault weapons, sniper rifles, combat shotguns, 50 cals, and they're usually on a list called the munitions list, and that's overseen by the State Department, which is supposed to be sort of anti-political, above politics. What this proposal would do, is shift these weapons to a different list, a commercial list, overseen by the Commerce Department.
Notoriously
political.
Well, also, for the record, the State Department is a left-of-center organization. I mean, I have to tell you. But,
true, but more dependent on the administration.
Right.
Commerce is where you give your friends
Commerce Department
trade deals.
I am, again, not willing to fill in the blank here of what that means. But there is a question in my mind about why we are now moving these specific guns to the jurisdiction of the Commerce Department.
I want to be concerned with you.
That is so weird.
I don't see. Someone help me. Why are U.S. companies already allowed to sell guns, being more removing some of the red tape and allowing them to sell more guns to certain specified countries? Not all countries. We're not sending guns into conflict zones in Africa. Why would that be a bad idea? And if it's not a bad idea, why is the Obama administration doing it?
I'm a gun fan, and I'm against overburdened regulations. I'm with you. But aren't you a little suspicious?
I am, of course.
Why are they doing it?
You want to give Obama a high five,
but you don't. Everybody at the table participate.
I'm sorry.
I'm observing.
It's fun. So Jedediah, I do have a conspiracy theory, however.
Tell us.
Which is that the United States is leading the global gun control effort at the UN. And in fact, in this July, there is an arms trade treaty that will be drafted that, again, the United States is leading, that would regulate and control how these arms are sold on the open market. So my question is, politically, is the Obama administration sort of playing both audiences, the domestic audience and the international audience? I mean, it really doesn't make sense that they're loosening restrictions, moving things from state to commerce, so away from the UN, meanwhile leading a global gun control effort at the UN.
So trying to appeal to both ends of the spectrum at the same time.
It
could be, but I don't know that people are going to be that aware of that. I think that what you just pointed out is something that's probably not very well known. When I read this, my impulse was to think, well, why is he doing this? His left-wing base is going to hate him now. So I think that's the gut reaction.
Left-wing internationalists are going to love
him. Yeah, I think you'd have to know those details, and maybe you do have a point there. Maybe there is a little bit of conspiracy going on. My gut reaction looking at this, as someone who supports gun rights, was I'm just a little uncomfortable with where the guns might wind up, meaning you're talking about safe countries, talking about NATO allies. Okay, well then what if it goes to one of those countries which we consider safe, and then they have some lax rules, and then it winds up in a country that we wouldn't deem safe? That was my main concern just upon reading it. I'm not an expert on the issue. I'm just a little bit uncomfortable with this level of weaponry. They're talking about drones, they're talking about satellites, they're talking about some big heavyweight stuff. It's just a little uncomfortable. Maybe that's just a gut instinctual reaction. little uncomfortable for me.
Well, again, focusing in on the firearm side of this. I mean, for one, this is a federal issue. I mean, this is a federal issue, unlike some of the other gun rights things we talk things when we talk about this. The federal government does have the right to regulate what weapons are being sent abroad. So now it's just a question of, do we think are they doing a good job of regulating this? And the instant they start saying we want better time for domestic manufacturers, we want less bureaucracy, I start to think this is sounding good.
Right.
And I guess just to your point, Jedediah, that's sort of that argument that it could end up in the wrong hands, down the food chain, down the line eventually, is used by a lot of liberal politicians in the U.S. to try to restrict gun sales here.
Right.
So I just think that that's sort of a dangerous argument. You can never know what the end point of these things are going to be with absolute certainty. I think we have a lot of regulations in place right now.
Does it change your calculation that this effort started, apparently was being driven by Defense Secretary Robert Gates from the Bush administration, that he said if we concentrate our resources on the really risky stuff that we really don't want landing in the hands of our enemies, we would be more effective and let these other things go out to the global market?
If drones don't land themselves on the risky chart, what's on the risky chart?
Well, when you say drones, I mean, drones are getting easier and easier to build yourself. In fact, people are building them themselves. And other countries are making them too. And I guess that's the other side of this, is that, when you look at other manufacturers of firearms, in the global marketplace, if there's an issue of competition and scarcity here, I mean, I think the U.S. should try to give gun manufacturers here at home as much of a leg up as possible. Again, within those clearly defined parameters. We're not talking about guys showing up, in the souk in Yemen and being like, yeah, here, buy whatever you want. Although, by the way, an AK-47 is probably about 50 bucks there. It's not hard to get, when you look at some of these countries we're so concerned about weapons getting into, I have to say, the one thing, sometimes food is the problem, but weapons are not. That certainly was the case in Somalia. So, there's only so much you can do with that to begin with. But on this case, I have to say, unless Amy's right, unless maybe there's some sort of a sleight of hand here where they're going to sort of promote this, but then maybe it'll be null and void because we sign on to a treaty that essentially obligates us to have the international community deciding where U.S. guns can go abroad. But other than that, I really looked into this closely, trying to find the aha. That's what this is all about. That's not good. And so far, I have to say, this looks like it's a pretty reasonable thing.
I like it. I'm into it. I don't get it. I'm confused.
I'm shocked and confused by it, too.
And suspicious. Yes. And we'll see how this develops. It was interesting. Even within, I did a search. I couldn't find the exact list of countries that are included in this safe group. I think this is being underreported, and I think we need to know a lot more.
And there are 36
Well, the place of Mexico on that list, obviously, would be you'd want to know, are we...
Of course we would.
I mean, it's 36 countries. You would think that Mexico, our southern neighbor, so we can loosen gun restrictions to Mexico? And
the administration is being, understandably a little quiet about this story because it begs so many questions. But hopefully it's something we can circle back to another time.
Yeah, we will follow on this. And if they bail on the whole thing, then we'll know. That this
I don't trust this.
All right. And you heard it from SC Cup. The biggest stories of the day that matter the most to you. Coming up, we'll hear what they are when Scott Baker of The Blaze joins us.
Democrats maintain their Senate majority. Harry Reid celebrates.
Don't let this happen. You still have the power to take the Senate. Glenn Beck and FreedomWorks for America are committed to mobilizing millions of patriots to fire Harry and take the Senate. We must begin now. Donate $20.12 to TakeTheSenate.com and get this great bumper sticker. Glenn Beck, FreedomWorks, and you, an unstoppable force. But we must have your donation today. Go to TakeTheSenate.com now.
Food independence, emergency preparedness, self-reliance. MyPatriotSupply.com. Get our survival seed vault and feed your family from your own garden for just $37.95. Our non-hybrid heirloom seeds are genuinely American, just like you. Your survival needs and survival seeds are at MyPatriotSupply.com. MyPatriotSupply.com. Self-reliance. MyPatriotSupply.com.
Tatler Reusable Canning Lids. Family owned since 1976. That's right, Tatler Reusable Canning Lids. Yes, reusable, with a lifetime guarantee. Made in America, BPA free. Tatler Reusable Canning Lids. Because those who can Do get rid of the disposable lid. Go to reusablecanninglids.com. Tatler Reusable Canning Lids.
I live alone, so when I slipped and fell in the kitchen last month and couldn't get to a phone, that's when I knew I needed Life Alert. With just one press of this button, I'm connected to the Life Alert Center, where I can get the help I need, even when I cannot reach a phone. With Life Alert, I'm never alone.
Call 1-800-996-6392 for your free Life Alert brochure. That's 1-800-996-6392. Call today.
A blogger offers up a $10,000 bounty for President Obama's college transcripts. But is that something the readers of theblaze.com are interested in enough to make it into the top 3 stories right this very second? Let's find out from the site's editor-in-chief, Scott Baker. Hey, Scott.
Hi, Amy. Well, Obama's younger days, certainly that is one of the big stories today. Not the one you mentioned, however. Let's take a look. Let's go to number 3. I'm cranking up the chart beat right here, and it's telling us that the number 3 story right now, the latest from Bill Ayers. I know you're saying, haven't heard from Bill Ayers in like, a week? Yep, he's back. So this time he's talking about America, the country in which he lives. Basically he's saying, and this would be the quote, America's game is over, and that he sees another world coming. Okay, Bill, thank you. Next is something that might be a little bit of a surprise. Billy Hollowell, one of our writers, noticed that on Google, on the Google Trends, on the hot searches today, the number 1 search on there, David Barton. David Barton was getting more searches than Jessica Simpson, than Kate Upton, than the Dark Knight trailer. I'm just looking at it right now. Crazy. He has the new book out, but it is driven in part because he was on Jon Stewart's The Daily Show last night. So you'll want to take a look at that post to see what David Barton had to say and about his interchange with Jon Stewart. The number 1 story right now, by far on the site, is these new revelations about Obama's ex-girlfriends. Upcoming book from David Marinis reveals the names of, Obama wrote about some girlfriends in Dreams from My Father, maybe with a little help from Bill Ayers, but nobody's ever really been able to ID them. And we not only have the identities, but there's even a picture, at least one picture. And so a lot of people checking that out. Now, the other one I want to tell you about is it's a visual image. I'm just even hoping that they don't have it to show you. It'd be better if we just do not show it. And it's the outrage over this mother who is taking her daughter to the tanning parlor. And 5 years old, and she had a little bit of a sunburn. Her teacher said, "How'd you get that?" She said, "I went tanning with mommy." So this is causing great consternation that a mother would take her 5-year-old to a tanning salon. I'm saying that the bigger issue is when you look at the mother, you will gasp in disbelief. She looks like, I think she looks like something that came out of an Egyptian pyramid. I think it looks like entirely like leather. And in fact, she does not even look like a normal human being in any way, shape, or form. And so I'm concerned about the daughter, but I think that we as a nation need to have an intervention with this woman and just drag her away from the tanning bed. That's what I got from you today, right here in the Pittsburgh International Airport.
All right, sounds like this mom has a touch of Donatella Versace or something.
Exactly.
Exactly. Well, thanks a lot, Scott. We appreciate it. Is the Sinai Peninsula the next breeding ground for Islamist militants? We'll visit the increasingly unstable region when we come back.
The TRS Files, True Tax Resolution Stories.
My name is Gibb, and I am not an actor. As a result of my dealings with Tax Resolution Service, my tax burden to the IRS went from more than $35,000 to zero.
If you owe the IRS over $20,000 or more in back taxes, have unfiled returns, or are under audit, call Tax Resolution Services now, 888-7804-TAX, or visit taxresolution.com/GBTV.
Democrats maintain their Senate majority. Harry Reid celebrates.
Don't let this happen. You still have the power to take the Senate. Glenn Beck and FreedomWorks for America are committed to mobilizing millions of patriots to fire Harry and take the Senate. We must begin now. Donate $20.12 to TakeTheSenate.com and get this great bumper sticker. Glenn Beck, FreedomWorks, and you, an unstoppable force. But we must have your donation today. Go to TakeTheSenate.com now.
Food independence, emergency preparedness, self-reliance. MyPatriotSupply.com. Get our survival seed vault and feed your family from your own garden for just $37.95. Our non-hybrid heirloom seeds are genuinely American, just like you. Your survival needs and survival seeds are at mypatriotsupply.com. mypatriotsupply.com. Self-reliance. mypatriotsupply.com.
By age 5, I could drain a three-pointer. By 8, I could outplay opponents twice my size. By 10, I knew someday I would make the pros. Focus, dedication, determination. These are the things that have prepared me for today. But for what tomorrow might bring, I prepared with Food Insurance Emergency Food Supply. It gives me the confidence to face any opposition. Order today at foodinsurance.com.
The Middle East is now home to another hotbed of terrorism, one that Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calls, quote, kinda like the Wild West. We're talking about the strategic triangle-shaped area of land between Egypt and Israel. There have been dozens of attacks there since the fall of former Egyptian ruler Hosni Mubarak. It's the Sinai Peninsula, now clearly on the radar of the local branch of al-Qaeda, suspected to be behind many of the attacks. Egypt is still awaiting a new government and constitution, and it's said to have lost control of the entire area. And now Israel says it sees the Sinai as a bigger threat even than Iran. Meanwhile, Egypt is facing another round of deadly protests today. Egypt and Middle East expert Eric Traeger joins us live from Washington.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Eric, good to have you. So help us understand what's going on in the Sinai Peninsula. Is al-Qaeda basically taking over as if it's a part of a failed state?
I mean, the truth is we don't really know whether it's al-Qaeda, whether it's some other terrorist organization, or exactly who is taking control of the situation there. Sinai is basically a lawless territory. You have about 30 Bedouin tribes there that are fighting each other for dominance, and the state has always been pretty weak in Sinai due to the lack of security forces there under the peace treaty. But even though Israel has allowed Egypt to bring more forces into Sinai, Egypt has never followed suit. So it's a lawless territory that is increasingly giving rise to terrorism.
So the Bedouin tribes, are they adopting terrorist ideology? Are we seeing sort of a growth of that?
Well, there's certainly an upsurge in radical Islamist ideology and in Salafism. We're definitely seeing that, and we're seeing the emergence of other terrorist organizations. For example, Al-Takfir wal-Hijra has been reported in the Sinai. But what you really have there is a tribal atmosphere and a very weak state that is giving rise to all sorts of things, ranging from criminal activity to terrorism to missiles being fired into Israel, which is, of course, what happened last August. So it's a very, very sensitive point on the map.
Eric, it's Essie. I was reading today, I was skimming through some of the headlines, and I came across a number along the lines of, is Egypt too big to fail? Do we allow Egypt as a state to fail? What does that mean? What are people asking, and what are the implications for that?
That's a great question. I mean, I think when people talk about that very question, is Egypt too big to fail, they're really talking about the economy. Egypt is currently facing declining cash reserves, and it's not inconceivable that Egypt could go bankrupt within the year. That is a very alarming scenario, given that it's a country of 80 million people. It's also, raises prospects of a failed state that would be a breeding ground for terrorist organizations. Right. So I think there is this consensus that Egypt is too big to fail. We need to do something to bail it out. The question is what? Do we have the resources? And I think more importantly, if Egypt is going to be run by Islamist groups that are sensitive to terrorist organizations, at least ideologically, do we as the United States have an interest in helping Egypt?
Hey, Eric, it's Buck. So I want to ask you, with regard to securing the Sinai, if we broke it down into sort of the will or the capability of the Egyptian government, I mean, do you think that if they wanted to, they would be able to, at this point, given all of the dissension and the political wrangling, would they be able to secure the Sinai, or do they just not even have? Is it a lack of will, or is it a lack of capability? Do you know what I mean? Could they do this if they wanted to, and do they want to do this?
It's really hard to say because since last year's revolution, the military has really been stretched thin. I mean, the military is not only guarding borders, but it's also guarding cities, and that has just really depleted the military's resources. Not only that, I think that fighting, militancy and terrorism in the Sinai is just such a sensitive issue that the military almost doesn't want to deal with it seriously. Now, in the past month, there have been reports that the military is waging some sort of operation against terrorist organizations in the Sinai. We have no way of knowing how that's going. What we do know is that the gas pipeline to Israel and Jordan has been attacked 14 times since last year's revolt, and of course, Egypt has suspended gas sales to Israel. So there are real regional implications to the failure of the military, and we just don't know whether that's because their resources are stretched thin or as you suggested, whether they just don't have, the inkling to do it.
Hey, Eric, it's Will Kane. So the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty, that was signed in 1982, is that right?
It was signed in 79.
79, I'm sorry. And prior to that, the Sinai border, the Sinai Peninsula, the border of Egypt and Israel right there, was the focus of a lot of conflict between the two countries. It was the focus during the Six-Day War, on and on. After that peace treaty, what's that border been like between Egypt and Israel? Up until this story now that we're hearing that the Sinai is a new focus for worries for Israel, what's it been like over the past 30 years?
I mean, as a security issue, it's been extremely quiet. What you've had is some movement over that border by Bedouin who sometimes pass through Israel into Jordan. You've also had immigrants trying to enter Israel illegally, especially from Africa. But for the most part, as a security problem, it's been quiet. That has definitely changed in the last year since the revolt. One thing to keep in mind, and the reason why this is such a sensitive issue for the United States, is that you have an Islamist government probably about to take power in Cairo. But that government isn't going to want to fight a war with Israel. They might not want peace with Israel, but they don't want to fight a war. The question is not whether they'll fight a war. The question is, how will they respond to a crisis? Now, a crisis will start in the Sinai. It will start in all likelihood, as we saw last August, where you have an attack from the Sinai on Israel, to which Israel responds, perhaps kills by accident some Egyptians, perhaps some soldiers, as happened last August, and then Cairo has to respond. Now, when you have the military in power in Cairo, the military dialed down the tension. The Islamists appear unlikely to dial down the tension, and that's really where a problem between Israel and Egypt would occur, how this new Egyptian government responds to a crisis.
Eric, Jedediah here. I keep reading about this 165-mile fence that Israel is building along the border. What will that exactly do? Do you think it'll be successful? They say it's going to be done around 2012. You think it'll happen, and do you think it will work?
I think Israel is very committed to building that fence. I think it will certainly work with things such as smuggling, with dealing with illegal immigration. But a fence is not going to stop a rocket launched from the Sinai from hitting a bus in Israel. And that's really the problem, because the longer that Sinai goes unpoliced or underpoliced, the more likely it is that you'll have another attack on Israel from the Sinai. The more likely it is that Israel will have to respond to protect its citizens. And that's really where you get to a very, very dangerous crisis with a government in power that will be inclined towards appealing to the populist impulses of Egyptian society. So it's a real danger point, and it's just the point where a crisis is likely to begin. Now, you mentioned before that there are these protests, these violent confrontations going on in Cairo. I mean, that just shows how diminished the security presence is in Egypt generally, and it's of course worse in the Sinai. So Egypt generally is increasingly becoming a failed state in many respects, and the most dangerous from a security standpoint is what's happening in the Sinai.
Well, Eric, let me follow up on your point about the Egyptian government and if it's led by Islamists. There's also, of course, the border between Egypt and Gaza. And when I was in Israel in 2005, Israel was pulling out the settlements there and very, very worried about that border becoming quite porous and arms and rockets and things like that trading between Egypt and Gaza. Does Egypt have any interest now in trying to secure that border there? And particularly if an Islamist government is in charge, Will mentioned the will to secure that border. Does that disappear as well?
Absolutely. I mean, you're hitting on a really, really important issue, especially from the Israeli security standpoint. The likelihood that weapons will have a much easier way of getting into Gaza, which we should remember, it's already pretty easy to get weapons into Gaza because there are these illegal underground tunnels that are dug in the Sinai and enter Gaza, and many weapons and rockets have entered that way. But that's only likely to get worse, and basically every presidential candidate in Egypt has said that they will keep the border open. Now, right now, you have a military junta that at the very least has, for the most part, minimized the flow of traffic between Gaza and Egypt. But that is definitely likely to change once the military hands over power on June 30th.
Hey, Eric, right after the fall of Gaddafi, there were a lot of press reports about unsecured, massive weapon stockpiles, including shoulder-fired missiles and that sort of thing. And people were speculating that they're going to find buyers for these. This is, Libya being a poor country. Obviously, the borders in this area of the world are not secure. Around Israel they are, but other than that, they wouldn't be. Do you think that the current Egyptian government has any ability or will to stop those weapons transfers that could be occurring from Libya, which everyone seems to think has a tremendous, weapon stockpiles that have been pilfered, into the Sinai and possibly even Gaza? I mean, is that a worry for you right now?
That's absolutely a valid concern. Weapons have been flowing in from Libya. We've seen reports of that. The military junta that's currently in power has taken some efforts to try to stem it. But again, this is a military regime that is really stretched thin, basically all over the country. And weapons are making their way into Egypt and, of course, into Sinai, and we think into Gaza as well. One thing that you should also keep in mind is that Egypt itself has really weaponized as a society. The breakdown of security within the cities has led many families to procure small arms, and the more small arms that flow into Egypt purely for personal protection, of course, some of those arms end up making their way into Sinai and perhaps into Gaza. So, I mean, we're looking at a country right now that is being weaponized on many different fronts, and of course, those weapons are spilling over into other conflicts. It's a very, very dangerous environment.
Do you think Israel will expand the Iron Dome program in order to shoot down incoming ordnance? Do you see that happening, and is that a viable sort of not solution, but short-term measure to try to stem the possible strikes in Israel proper from the Sinai?
That's a great question. I mean, I haven't seen any reports of that, of the Iron Dome system being deployed by the Egyptian-Israeli border. What you do have right now is Israeli forces themselves coming closer to the border. Now, last week, General Tantawi, he's essentially the de facto president of Egypt, he said that anyone who comes close to our territory will break their legs. So there's been a real escalation in the rhetoric, even from this military regime that, at the very least, has maintained the peace and has shown that it's committed to maintaining the peace. And it's an increasingly unstable situation. Now, I don't want to suggest for a moment that we're looking at a possible war in the near future between Israel and Egypt. I certainly don't expect that, but we are looking at a crisis. We already had one such crisis last summer, which culminated in the attack on the Israeli embassy.
Sorry for the
in
inside
Cairo,
baseball. The Iron Dome is an interceptor missile system that Israel uses for the audience. I know you and I are having
really cool.
We're getting into that, but anyway, sorry.
So, Eric, quickly before we go, we've been talking about this in terms of Israel's security, the tension, the violence, and militants in the Sinai Peninsula, but you mentioned, as did Bach, weapons coming from Libya, flooding the Middle East. It's basically, so it's swimming in the weapons, militancy, the rise of Al-Qaeda. Is this just Israel's problem if Sinai becomes basically like its own mini failed state?
No, I mean, this is going to be a problem that can have tremendous effects for the United States security. I mean, remember, the Suez Canal is right in between what we would call mainland Egypt and the Sinai. This can have real effects for the ability of ships to pass through the Suez Canal. And remember, we have a major security presence in the Persian Gulf that depends on not only having access to the Suez, but American ships having priority in the Suez. So this is a real problem for American security, broadly speaking.
All right, Eric, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Hope to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. A woman who might have spent a little too much time in the tanning bed, out-of-control anarchist and S.E. Cup's own gal pal has an announcement. It's going to get weird. The Island of Misfit Stories is up next.
This is the future of America. We're a country going down the tubes. I refuse to believe that courage and compassion are our birthright. Our glory days are over. I'd be lying if I said that we're a strong and vibrant country. that our families and neighbors sustain us. Here's what you should know: the same tired excuses. We no longer have the desire to work hard, the hunger to turn things around, the faith in God to lead us. Across the country, I see in our faces that we're happy to be second rate. I refuse to believe America is the moral leader of the world. This isn't the end. America is the moral leader of the world. I refuse to believe that we're happy to be second rate. Across the country, I see in our faces the faith in God to lead us, the hunger to turn things around, the desire to work hard. We no longer have the same tired excuses. Here's what you should know: that our families and our neighbors sustain us. We are a strong and vibrant country. I'd be lying if I said that our glory days are over. Courage and compassion are our birthright. I refuse to believe that we are a country going down the tubes. This is the future of America.
Are you concerned that they're becoming so brazen with all of this now? I mean,
I am.
What do you think that says? Because it's bothered me a great deal that the White House is almost becoming reckless, but it doesn't seem reckless. It just seems so arrogant that they just don't feel. I mean, because if Mitt Romney wins, jail time for a lot of people. Jail time.
Tonight we go from the not-so-shocking to the jaw-dropping in the nightly segment we like to call Island of Misfit Stories. So, Essie, shocking or dropping?
Neither.
Okay.
Newt Gingrich's campaign is over. He assured us in a speech today that he gave that he will not give up on the fight for a lunar colony. In case anyone was really upset about that, what becomes of this lunar colony?
Well, Will Kane can tell us what happens with these asteroids and mining them
You're
for
tying the two
precious
together,
metals.
right? I will not
Exactly.
mock Newt Gingrich for his ambition.
You will not kick a man at his own wake.
Not
I
for his
respect
space
that.
ambitions.
No, so you know, obviously we knew this was coming. He told us last week he would be making this announcement. Everything with Newt is prolonged. And I guess now he's free to continue his nationwide zoo tour, with which we wish him much luck.
So did he actually close his campaign, or did he suspend it?
Well, I mean, he is, you know, he's suspended his campaign, but no one expects him to go anywhere. He's saddled with a bunch of debt.
But you're very
upwards
suspicious
of
about
$4
Romney.
million. Yeah, yeah, there's word that Romney and the RNC might help relieve Gingrich of some of this debt, which is something that, you know, people do. It happens. But it's very weird. I mean, their rivalry was unlike the Santorum-Romney rivalry in that it was very personal. I think for Santorum and Romney, it was just politics, and they could probably work together in the future if they had to. I don't know that Gingrich and Romney are actually going to have much business together. And I think it's really weird that Mitt Romney seems to be really kind of excited about getting Newt Gingrich's endorsement. That's weird.
Hillary and Barack, people thought that wasn't necessarily
No,
gonna
that
be-
actually makes sense. Hillary at the time was still very much a respectable
No, but there was some
figure.
there was some nastiness that people thought.
Oh,
might-
no, there was nastiness between Obama and Biden, and they obviously cozied up. We're not talking just nastiness. I mean, I don't know that Romney needs Newt Gingrich.
Yes.
Shocking, jaw-dropping? What do we
Well, kind of gross is what we have. And Scott mentioned this earlier, this tanning incident, this New Jersey mom who was arrested for allegedly tanning her daughter, bringing her to a stand-up tanner. She's been charged with child endangerment. The reason is that this little 5-year-old went to school, to her elementary school, and complained that she was suffering from these burns as a result of going tanning with mommy. Now, in order for you to truly understand this, I need you guys to see the mom. So
We do.
can
We
we
do.
just play that? I think everyone needs to see this.
I've been tanning my whole life, going to the beach, tanning salons, so forth. She's 6 years old. Yes, she does go tanning with mommy, but not in the booth.
Is she in blackface?
I'm concerned.
What was that?
I've never
is about to fall off.
You mentioned she's like Magda from Something About Mary.
Something's not right there. And I'm concerned that maybe someone who would have the kind of judgment to do this to themselves might have something a little wrong.
How is that possible? Seriously, how look at that picture. How is that possible?
And she, I mean, it makes her look 100. I can't believe she has a 6-year-old.
Doesn't the tanning salon have some responsibility? It's like, you know, you're not supposed to serve somebody they're falling down drunk. Shouldn't they be like, you know, I think you're good enough. I think you've hit it.
Take a week off.
Exactly. You know, go to the beach as is.
I refuse.
Come back and let me know if it's not enough.
Yeah, and she says, you know, I love to tan.
Does she like to gym and laundry as well?
Painted it on. That's beyond Jersey Shore, baby.
Yeah,
that is.
Yeah. I mean,
Something else.
honestly, I didn't even know white skin could do that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Snooki, take a look at your future.
But Snooki's orange. That one was like chocolate. How did
That's
she get
not
that?
self-tanner, and that's not, I have
I'm
yet
going
to
all
see
the
that.
above. That's self-tanner, that's tanning
Maybe she took
booth,
some
that's...
chocolate, and I don't know.
She's all in.
I don't know.
Genetic disorder. I don't know.
Take a week off.
Weird.
Yeah.
All right. Buck.
Hard right turn. Sorry. We're going serious for a minute here. So a college student was held for 5 days by the DEA after a raid without food, water, or human contact. He almost died. He lost 15 pounds. Apparently they found they think that he may have tried to kill himself because he was hallucinating on day 3. You can go a pretty long time without food. You cannot go a long time without water. They did not bring him water, and I guess just the one thing this highlights is that, you know, people out there in the audience should also know, when you are in custody, the law enforcement officers who have you have a very serious responsibility. You are literally in their custody. They are in charge of you. So this is egregious stuff. This should never be allowed to happen. He is going to sue. He's already said that, obviously. He should. He's probably never going to have to work again in his life, which I have to say I would understand, meaning, you know, I assume the settlement will be very large. At first, the DEA, I have to say, not such good PR from the DEA. At first, they had a spokesperson say, well, he was at a party and said that he was going to get high, and we don't know much more than that. Since then, yeah, like that means you're supposed to be locked in a room for 5 days and almost, you know, deteriorate and die. And that's what I'm sorry. Thank you, Will. That was another detail I left out. He drank his own urine to stay alive.
To hydrate.
Unbelievable stuff. And then, since then, a more senior DEA officer has come out, or spokesperson has come out and said, this was really bad. We're very sorry about this, and yeah, this should not have happened. So again, those procedures that are in place, you know, the phone call, the notification, all that, I mean, that's important because stuff like this in America should never be happening.
Is that covered in Miranda? Is that under some other law?
What
Your
covered?
Rights while in custody.
They tell you that's just your rights not to self-incriminate, really. But there are procedures they have in place. You know, in New York, for example, for most crimes, they can hold you for 6 hours, basically, for most things. After 6 hours, unless they're processing you beyond that, you have to be released. I mean, it's, you know, it's like an alarm goes off. You've been here 6 hours, you have to be released. And that's so, you know, people don't languish for 5 days for a simple violation or something. So anyway.
Dreadful. Are you able to rush through yours?
No, I'm going to stay on the side. Oh, do you need me to go fast?
Yeah.
5 men charged with the plot of bombing a bridge in Cleveland. They wanted to bomb a bridge between 2 wealthy neighborhoods in Cleveland. They were able to get their hands on a bomb through what ended up being an FBI affiliated person, and they were given a phone to text in the code to detonate the bombs, and they tried to do it over and over. It failed, obviously, because they were given a dud. Failed over and over, and they called their guy, the FBI guy, and said, hey, it's not working. Is the code right? Anyway, they were arrested. We laughed, but they had a serious plot to bomb this bridge. They were connected to Occupy Cleveland, associated with it. They not exactly. The representatives of Occupy Cleveland said they did not share their nonviolent views, obviously, but they were associated, and that detail is always buried when you hear the story today.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah. Anarchist violence, there's a long history of this, actually. But they say they're nonviolent now, but I have to say, if you go back to the anarchist movement, they've been willing to assassinate people, throw bombs into crowds, do things. Again, it's not all of them, but there is a long history of this.
So how easy is it to get a bomb? Is it usually that you
when you're working with the
FBI foreman, obviously very easy, but you know, you didn't have that luck. Is it fairly difficult to get this kind of material?
You mean to get the material to build one?
Yeah.
It's unfortunately not that hard.
Oh. Yikes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have, but you can check out more on these stories at theblaze.com. And if you have any real news we may be missing, be sure to let us know. Email us at realnews@gbtv.com. Good night.